Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us to this session. We are so happy that you are here. My name is Cindy Beth Perez, and I am a music therapist here in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. I work in many different places. One of them is my private practice. I also work as a music therapist in one of the major hospitals called Irma San Pablo, along with colleague Marta, in the town of Caguas, which is South San Juan. I also have been working in many different projects with families, children, adults, and elderly as well in the many stages of life. I teach a course in music therapy in the Pontificia Universidad Católica. It's a Catholic university in the south side of the island. And today I'm sharing this presentation with my beloved, very beloved colleague, Marta Hernandez. So I will allow her to present herself and tell us about you, Marta.
Hola, hello, my name is Marta Hernandez Candelas. I am a music therapist at a hospital, Hospital Irma Caguas, no, Irma de Bayamón now. And I also teach, I'm a professor at the Conservatory of Music in Puerto Rico, where I teach music education and music therapy courses. I also work in different scenarios, including children under the custody of the states. And we are gonna be talking about those experiences after the hurricanes, the earthquakes, and pandemia.
Yes. We also want to point that our colleague Natalia Rodriguez is not here today, but I'll tell you a little bit about Natalia, who has been part of this team that have worked with these children in different shelters in Puerto Rico. And she works also with children with special needs, particularly autism. And she is a teacher also in one of the most prestigious choirs for children in Puerto Rico, Coro de Niños de San Juan. She was not able to be with us today, but also the work that we have been doing, she's been an integral part of that work. So we want to acknowledge her. And our presentation is called Lessons from Difficult Times, Music Therapy to Support Children Who Experience Trauma. And as you will see, there is very little work done with the children who are experiencing traumas, particularly from catastrophes. But this is a very important work that I believe that just as the world is just happening, things are happening, it will be very, very relevant in the upcoming years.
All children deserve to be happy. That's our main thought about this topic. Puerto Rico has gone through many disasters, economic, earthquakes, hurricanes, but beyond that, our children need to be happy and to have healthy child-rearing. And that's our main goal, to provide our children that opportunity, especially those that are underserved. So that is what guides us to do this presentation for you. I want to tell you that we work with the Música y País organization. This is run by Maria del Carmen Hill, who is the founder of this organization. It's a nonprofit. And after Maria and Irma, we started this project thinking that we could help children that were basically isolated without electricity and abandoned by their families or by the state in a way. So we used music therapy to provide them that comfort. But we had to learn a lot because we were not experienced in this area. We didn't have a major disaster since let's say in 1996 when we had Georges, the other hurricane that hit the island badly. So 20 years after we were facing the Hurricane Maria. And Música y País is the organization that started. So we want to thank them and also Maria del Carmen here.
This presentation, we have drawn some objectives. And the number one is to explore a music therapy treatment model to provide emotional support to minors from the group and residential shelters in Puerto Rico. And also, we hope that we can learn about the pre and post results, collected data, session plan songs, and interventions.
These are definitely hard times right now with the pandemic, and even for Puerto Rico, it's been like that for over 10 years. The island is bankrupt. Basically, the economy is really bad. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are moving to the other states. Is bad, crime is bad, violence is bad. There are many bad things. So these are definitely hard times, and we cannot cover that up. I think we have to face it and acknowledge that what is happening there in our island. Nevertheless, we decided to live in Puerto Rico because we believe that music therapy can provide our people, our citizens, better quality of life. And we have the commitment to make a difference. And we know that this is not going to happen just by doing music therapy. This is a whole community work beyond music therapy, but we believe that we can make a difference in our children and our adults. So that's why we want to share with you our experience in these disasters that definitely are being really bad for us. And I just want to mention that after the hurricane, I didn't have electricity for 5 months. I had 8 people. We are three, my husband, my son, and myself. But we had 8 people living in my house just because they lost their homes or they were underwater or different kind of situations. And they were with us about a month. And so for us personally, it was difficult. I know that it was the same for you, Cindy, but you had different situations. Can you share a little bit about it?
Yes, we also had about 5 or 6 months we were without electricity. We were about, I think, 2 months without potable water. I remember the day after 2 weeks, so we prepare at home for about 2 weeks of, no electricity and with no, there was nothing open. So we had enough food for 2 weeks, enough water. We had a cistern, a water cistern. So we had water for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, then we started to run out of things. And I remember it was my mom, my dad, and myself, and we were looking in the drawers to see if we found, if we could find some cash, because even though we had some, we had to be very careful. There was no electricity, there were no ATMs, so you could not get anything, any food if you didn't have cash. And you had to make hours, like a line for hours to get to a supermarket. And my parents have disabilities, so they would come with me, but I would have to be the one, taking the main role of finding the stuff. And it was very just seeing everything destroyed. Nothing was like it was. I myself got skin issues because we were bathing all the time with this water that was in a cistern, and we couldn't wash the clothes in the washer, so we had to do it by hand, and we didn't have the right detergent. So I had skin issues, a lot of people with skin issues. My father lost about, I don't know, was it over 25 pounds in a few months, and it was because his glucose levels were just gone crazy. So when he finally was able to see a doctor, they were very worried that he would have, uh, like, his kidneys would have been shutting down. Thank God that was not the case. But we had many, many situations in depression. Um, People were crying all the time, and it started raining a little bit. I saw people, just started cry and in fear of that, of that situation. They didn't want to experience it again. So it was a very difficult situation, and just thinking about it, and it's like reliving it. You become very emotional because you never think that you're gonna be in that situation, and we will be talking about that later on in the presentation. So
Yes. Here you have a picture of what Cindy Beth experienced and a little bit of what I experienced. Imagine those children that they didn't know where their parents were, if their parents were okay. They were being taken care by someone else that wanted them to be okay, but it was not their parents and they were alone. So imagine that picture. So we can think that their basic needs were covered, but the emotional needs were not covered. And that's something that most of us that went to the shelters noticed. And they were anxious, worried, and unfocused, we could say that. So the program initiated right after Maria, let's say 2 or 3 weeks after we were already going to different shelters. We went to 26, yes, shelters. We were supposed to go to 27, but one of them, it was not available for us. So we went to those shelters around the island. And Puerto Rico is a group of islands, but it seems everything seems to be close. You know, it's a small island, but after the hurricane, everything was far because the roads were not ready to travel, and there were many trees on the way. There were problems getting gas, so even if it's a small island, it was hard to get everywhere.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I can recall at least 2 times where we were driving one way and then there was no road. The road was not there, or there was a bridge that was not there anymore, and we had to do alternate. And just imagine, this is like in the middle of a mountain, so it's like how they find an alternate route, and it just takes you forever to get to the other side because this very mountainous. So I remember at least 2 situations that we were there, and then it's like, okay, where's the road? There was no road anymore. So
Yes. Also, no electricity.
no electricity. I remember one place we went is really high up in the mountain, and at Juntas, it's called the town. And these children, they the way where they are located, you have to cross like a river, and the river grew so much, right? There was like flooding, that they were absolutely isolated, and it was it was very difficult to get there. But I remember the lady from that place, after a certain time, she's like, okay, now you have to go. Okay, now you have to go. And I'm like, okay, I'm going. And she's like, no, 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 you have to go because there's no electricity. And the roads, like you go the road here, and then here is a cliff. So she's like, no, 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 you need to go because you're not from here. You will not know, how to stay on the road. You have to go now. There is no electricity. You won't see it. You have to go now. So it was very interesting of, that awareness of how dangerous it was in some places. Just because there was no electricity, we depend so much on that. So just recounting, we had Hurricane Maria, but sometime before Hurricane Maria, we also had Hurricane Irma. And Hurricane Irma didn't bring as much damage to Puerto Rico. It did some in the northern part of the island, but Hurricane Irma was a very strong, and it was very catastrophic in the Lesser Antilles, in Virgin Islands, okay, in the Virgin Islands. And what happened is that, as they had very, great needs, all kinds of needs, because their homes were completely destroyed, and Puerto Rico, which is like the bigger island, went on to help these islands in many ways. So Puerto Rico had people going over there to help, collecting clothes and food and water and supplies to get to those islands. And some people from those islands were taken here because this is like the major medical center for the Lesser Antilles and Virgin Islands. So we were already like giving all these resources and helping all these people. So we had a lot of refugees from these islands being treated in our hospitals. So our hospitals were full. And then like it was like a week later, and you correct me, Marta, if I'm wrong, then we had Hurricane Maria. So it was like a major hurricane, Cat 5, and that was, going to sweep the island. And what happened was we had a lot of these refugees still here, and all of a sudden we couldn't get anything, like resources in the island because everything was pretty much destroyed. So that happened in 2017. We talk a lot of Maria, but we were also impacted by Irma. And some places there was a lot of flooding and there were already a lot of losses.
So our children are the children of Maria. We call it the children of disaster. That sounds horrible, but really, the children are growing with the disasters because they had Irma, they had Maria, they had the economic pandemic, and then the earthquakes. The earthquakes started back in January of 2020. I remember we had the Epiphany Day. This is the Three Kings Day. There was a small earthquake in San Juan that could be felt in San Juan, but it was big in the south of the island. And a lot of people were sensing or feeling the movement of the earth since the end of December. And the houses were starting to break down, and then after the next earthquake they were breaking more until that 6th and the 7th of January that many houses collapsed in the south. So the people, they were so scared of listening to the sound of the soil and then coming the earthquake that they moved to camp areas. They were camping basically. And many people were camping until the end of February. And we did music therapy there. And in March, the pandemic started. So camping was not the best option for pandemia, but it was the best option for earthquakes. And children were there too. So imagine that 2 years after or 3 years after the hurricane, then earthquakes and then pandemic, and difficult times, definitely. But people here are very hopeful. They want things to be better, and I think we have a good attitude besides all that has happened to Puerto Rico.
Yes.
We need to think about what happened in people's mind when there is an earthquake. And I want to tell you that I was running a workshop the week of the earthquakes, and we were able to continue, but the post-traumatic stress disorder is still there. Sometimes even when I'm sitting here, I feel any kind of movement and I think, oh, okay, it's coming now. Let me run,
This is something, right, that as Marta said, in the metropolitan area, as you see in the map where it says San Juan and Caguas, we felt it. It wasn't as strong. Like if we felt it about a 3, it means that here was a 5. So as the wave happens through the land, then we'll feel less than it was actually felt in the south. And I was around the town of Caguas when the bigger one happened in after Three Kings Day, and I could feel it was shaking so hard that I tried to stand, and I started screaming, of course, calling for everybody to find safety, but I couldn't stand in my feet. And after that, we had a lot of replicas, and here in the hospital, how the hospital is built is to be flexible. So I had coworkers, including myself, that it would start shaking, and you feel it here more, and we would really get concerned. So I would immediately go out and see, because patients would start crying of of fear. So I would go there and just tell them, we are in a very safe place. This building was made to stand, this amount of shaking. And I was like, let me try to relieve it myself, because it affected everybody. Okay.
Yeah, here you can see camping for
Yes.
3 months, and then
SARS-CoV-19, coronavirus, or COVID-19. So it has many names now, but more children now are suffering of violence than before. This is because some of these children will go to school, and as they were not in their households, they had a lot of time in their schools. But now we have parents that were also enclustered with the children, already experiencing high stress, perhaps PTSD, and so on. So a lot of these children have been, victims of different kinds of violence, and some of these kids have been in need of foster care for the time being. Also, children have been in constant isolation. So in these residential group shelters that we've been visiting, um, these kids, right, they're not having their family with them. So it's like the people from that shelter, and they depend a lot socially on the visits, like groups that go visit them, therapists that go visit them. And all of the sudden there were no visits, of course, to protect them. But this does take a toll emotionally and psychologically on these children, because it's a feeling of abandonment. Okay. And that, if we feel, we adults, that I I've been working through the pandemic, so I've seen some of my friends that work with me, and I've been feeling isolated. Just imagine these children that depend on these things to be able to be social, and their process of socialization. um, so this pandemic has been very destabilizing for them. Also, I add to that staff absenteeism. So a lot of this staff was reduced because we cannot have a lot of people with these children, or it had to be the same people. So these children that had many caregivers, now maybe half of the caregivers will turn out to come, so that there was like more consistency in the people that they were in contact with. And that will also affect them emotionally, because these are the relationships that they have, in their hearts. They have this bonding with these people. So um pandemia has been very, very it is being a situation that have put our children also to experience the risk of being more depressive, because they're more isolated. They cannot do the things that they have been doing in the past. So these particular children that are in foster care have taken a toll emotionally to them, for them to.
so we have been doing psychological first aid like 3 or 4 times in our case because of the situations that have been happening on this island. And the psychological first aid is an initial disaster response intervention to promote safety, stabilize and survivors of disaster, and connect individuals to help and resources. And the psychological first aid is delivered to affected individuals by mental health professionals and other first responders. And in this case, we use our music tools and our music therapeutic tools to support those communities. So in those terms, the psychological first aid was given to see the scenario and to basically find out the needs. In my community, and my psychological first aid was with my family, with my cousin and my my aunt, that we lost our uncle uh, a week after the hurricane because he didn't get the proper services at the hospital. And he was diagnosed with cancer this same day of the hurricane. So they basically could not do anything to help him because there were no services for him. So the psychological first aid was to get food for my aunt, to talk to my cousin and to find out what their needs were. Also with my mom, that she into a major depression because she lost her brother and she could not do anything about it too. So those are the kind of first aids that we were doing. So at the beginning, I mean, in the first weeks, we were not doing music therapy. And psychological first aid means listening, comforting, connecting, protecting, instilling hope, and looking for basic needs in our community. And later on, I was saying like 3 weeks later, that's when we could really get into smaller places and help. I want to share you also the psychological first aid core actions is more targeted to children. Okay, contact and engagement. We should be responding to contacts initiated by survivors and to initiate contacts in a non-intrusive and compassionate and helpful manner. And this is very important. And I think that this is also true now with the pandemic. Now that we work in a hospital where there's so much stress by having so many people with COVID, and even the staff can be also sick because of the situation. We need to be, as music therapists, listening and be able to help in any way that is possible and also to not try to be over helpers, just try to be there for the people. And I want to give you an example, and I know that I am jumping to the pandemia, but I wanted to make context with what is happening right now and what it's probably you are facing in your communities. For example, here in the hospital, but the first thing we do in the morning is clean and sanitize everything. So I'm not doing music therapy at that time. I just want to be part of the team that is cleaning and helping and telling the people and the nurses in the community that I really want to be for them, to whatever they need. Even more, we want to help the patients, of course, too, but the staff needs that a lot. And that was true also for the children. And what do they need? They need water. Let's get water. They need food. Let's get food. And let's just be around and not push music. So we want to provide safety and comfort, psychological safety, and to be there to try to stabilize. And as what Cindy Beth was saying, there's an earthquake. Yes, the building, the hospital is moving, is shaking, but we are okay. We are in a safe building, and I'm here with you. And she did it at this scenario where people were really scared. And since in Puerto Rico, this is a constant mode of scariness, it's hard for us as therapists to keep it going. So we need to also acknowledge our own feelings and take our time to do this first psychological first aid for ourselves, and also to seek help, to seek psychological help, so we can be good helpers.
And I love Barb Els, and she knows it. I remember that Barb, on behalf also of the AMTA, she sent a letter and a little like care package with some simple things and just wanting to know how we were doing. And just that, it just remembering that makes me want to like tear up and cry, because it was such a comfort to know that someone was thinking of you and that someone wanted to know if you were okay. So our work, we're always giving that, you know, we're always asking people, how are you? How are you doing? But having someone, not only just someone, but a colleague, also an organization where you belong, saying, hey, we are here for you. That was very, very meaningful. And just that, just getting to ask, how are you? I don't know how you are. We've been trying to call. Of course, we didn't have our phones now depend on electricity, so we have phones. We didn't have cell phones either because all the towers were down. So just that gesture, it was therapeutic in itself. And and I got some water filters and some things that we really needed at the time. And I will never forget that kindness. So those of you that are in different regions, and when these kind of things happen, that contact, just how are you? That's all. What do you need? Can make the world of difference for the person that is going through a situation like a natural disaster or catastrophe of any kind.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. There are so many things coming to our minds
Mm-hmm.
in so many ways. The psychological first aid should be something that be taught all the time, and especially in these times for everyone, so that we can really help those that really need it and in the way they need it, because sometimes could be too much. Uh, Also, we have to be practical in the way we help, and we should try to make good connections and social supports, that if the need is based on not such an emotional way, but is but more in a physical way, we can provide those services that maybe I cannot do it, but someone else can go. So that's basically what we were doing the first weeks. And then after all this was done, then we got into the shelters with the children in those 26 places that we were mentioning at the beginning.
So we're going to talk a little bit about trauma, and there's some particular needs that our children in in foster care have. Children in foster care have challenges in areas
Mm-hmm.
of human development due to experiences of neglect, emotional abuse, physical or sexual abuse, sometimes because they have been witness of violence, gender violence or domestic violence, war violence or drug war, gang related violence. A foster care placement is traumatizing in the children enough. And as we all know, sometimes the way that children get in foster care is not a smooth transition. Basically, you know, you're taking away from everything that you know, and this may cause instability in the children, causing new behavior problems, delays in development, mental health issues. And I actually have also read about physical issues. Children get sick, right? And this is like a psychosomatic sickness. So they start, you know, vomiting, having tummy aches, and so on. So they start having health issues. Increases the risk for neurological disease. Early age abuse causes neurological changes. Remember that our brains are shaping up as we grow up. And when we are having neglect or abuse, our brain will absorb those kinds of interactions, or it's a kind of a stimulation that will affect many things, because this is an altered response to stress. It's not the stress to response that someone should normally have. Also will affect their socialization, because how they relate with other human beings will be challenged, right? It may cause psycho-emotional, psychosocial impairments, and neuroimaging shows higher activities in areas related to anger and impulse control. Remember, this is like this child is on fight or flight all the time. So it will affect the the memories, their brain, the executive function negatively. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we want to help reshape these experiences that these children have in a way that is non-threatening, because they don't need anything else, they don't need more threats, they need to experience, to get to know themselves. And I am very passionate about this project that we did and that is still going on. So we'll talk about who are these children that we work with, the children under the custody of the state in Puerto Rico. So this is the statistics to help you, just put a context in place. In 2010, 1 in 4 children in the US have been in the foster care system for about 3 years or more. There are approximately 400,000 children in foster care. That's a lot of children. Many of the children in foster care has parents who suffer from physical, psychological, and social needs. And of course, this means that they cannot take care of these children, and therefore they end up in the care of the state. The growing reason for children to be removed in the US is the use of controlled substances and neglect. The health of children in foster care is worse than children of the same age and socioeconomic status. Remember, some of these children will lack nutrition because they've been neglected by mom and dad or another caregiver. Frequently, these children also are diagnosed with anxiety and depression more than their peers.
Also, the type of risk than exposure to trauma that a child may suffer will depend on the place of origin of the child, his ethnic culture, traditions, and customs of the society the child belongs to. In Puerto Rico, most of the minors in foster care systems come from backgrounds of high socioeconomic needs, low superior education, and poverty. There are about 100 residential groups foster care shelters. And the residential group foster care shelters might have a religious affiliation. Most of them are Catholic based. The ones that we went to visit were mostly Catholic based, but they are not. They are paid by the states, so they not everything they do is religious. Some of them have been operating consecutively for many years, and they are an important part of the communities where children are taken care of. And we went to different kinds of shelters. Some of them were with adolescents, and some of them were with young children, even infants. In 2016, there were about 2,330 children in foster care, approximately the same distribution between girls and boys, and 57% were in foster care with family member. 14% were in a non-related family, and 21% in shelter residential group homes. In 2016, 38% of the children, meaning 885 children, had been in 2 or more placements in foster care. And when we compare this with 2014, only 15 were reported to have 2 or more placements. And I can tell you that in these last years, there have been more changes, bigger changes, especially with the new laws that have come with children have to be placed based on their diagnostics. And the biggest age subgroup in children is from 16 to 20 years old, followed by children who are 11 to 15 years old.
Yes, talking about those changes, there were like even bigger changes when this family first law started to come up, and it's very interesting because here this shelter, group shelters are part of a community. okay, of their, wherever they're located, they're part of that community, and the community supports them. Is some of these shelters have been here for like what I would say 100 years or more.
100 years,
So,
yes.
um, this is not only just a place that is there. No, it's an institution that is part of those communities, and that community is part of those institutions. So, this law, even though they try to say, well, we want children to be in, in what seems to be a home, like with family, foster families, some of these children have been in this type of site for the entire lives. Also, in these places, they receive a lot. At least in Puerto Rico, it seems, what I've heard of is that it works because they're being taken care of all their needs and more. They have all these kinds of therapies. This state has like a very strict oversight of these places, so there's more, the children in terms of the state is, they're more visible to the state and what is happening with them, that if they are placed in individual just foster families, which there are many foster families, right? It says about 14% by 2016. But also what has happened is that because the changes of this law, many of the children have been moved from their, group homes that they've been there for a long time, and it creates instability on these children, because they are away sometimes from their siblings, because one of their siblings has special need, and they're trying to like group and only the special needs together, or victims of sexual abuse together, and sometimes it seems like they are missing from being able to share their life with children of other types of needs and backgrounds. I want to show you with this map the municipalities that were impacted by the Fundación Música y País Music Therapy Project. So as you can see, I hope that you can see, we had many towns across the island. And as Marta said, Puerto Rico is a group of islands. So all of this part is like high mountains, and this is the place where I told you that the kids were super isolated. And once I was there, they were like kicking me out because the sun was coming down. So we were right here. So we have many, many stories of the places that we went, and how children were impacted. And this opportunity was also a way for us to be able to do something when we felt that we couldn't do anything else. So it also was therapeutic for ourselves. Our model so far, it was phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and hopefully there'll be phase 4. Phase 1 was el primer abrazo, the first embrace, and it was the emergency first aid. Phase 2, alimentando nuestros corazones, nurturing our hearts, was the part of the recovery. So after the first 2 visits that we did as emergency first aid, we got our heads together to see like who could we impact as more long term with more visits. So the second phase, you'll see that it wasn't as much shelters as the first one, but there were more visits to aid in that recovery. And then phase 3, restaurando nuestra alma, mending our souls, which was the time for reconstruction.
And this has been happening over and over because we did it for the hurricanes. We are doing it for the earthquakes, and now we are living it through the pandemic. And we are going to talk a little bit more about the goals and objectives that have been going on through this process. So in the first phase, the first time, we had, first of all, the initial assessments. So during the emergency, and And in the first visit, we depended on third parties' accounts to know some of the backgrounds of the groups of homes that we were visiting. It was difficult to know what exactly what's going on because of the all the situations that we mentioned before: no electricity, no cell phones, hard to get to places. So we depended on those informations or informants, but we were able to assess, and we were able to assess right at the moment when we met the children. And also during the second visit, then we had a better understanding of the situations, and also we had more support of the social workers and other employees, and even the psychologists that work with the children in different programs. And we had meetings to decide what we're going to do based on our culture, based on in general needs, but most of them had to be changed as we found the children as in their needs. So there was a big change in the first phase, in the pre-test and the post-test assessments. And we can also see in the different dimensions, because the first we are talking about cognitive dimensions and their behavior and their communication, as well in the social emotional skills and in the movement skills. All those skills were assessed in the first part, and then in the post-test we could see how they improved. They also behave in a different way the first time they saw us and the second time they saw us. So, and as we were saying, they were just 2 times we saw them. So it's not a big data, but it did give us information on how to help children. And we know that we should always assess what is happening and try to do our best to make a difference in their children. And here we have an example of our kids working with us and doing relaxation. Mm-hmm. The first goals that we developed were to provide an environment for emotional containment and relief. And the participants, as an objective, we determined that the participants will integrate the use of the body as a medium to relax. So we use our interventions to help them learn to relax even with the hurricane aftermath. Also, the participants will verbalize their fears and concerns at least once in the session, and they will identify a strategy to manage anxiety. The second goal was to transform the vision of the catastrophe to a vision of hope. We wanted to make a difference in their perspective. So the objective was that the participant will identify positive aspects within the catastrophe. And that at the moment might have seemed difficult, but we could see the difference through music therapy. They were really happy at the end of most sessions. The environment was completely different. They were creative, they were moving, they were singing, and that made a huge difference in the environment. And also to strengthen the peer and child caregiving relationships, the participants will collaborate with peers and caregivers in cooperative activities. So this means that we wanted to support the relationship within the community and the shelters. And we can say that this was a difficult goal to assess, because we were not there enough time. And when we were there with children, the caregivers were mostly away. I think they needed the time to relax, and so someone else could take care of them. And sometimes it's still happening. I think they are overwhelmed with so much to do.
Yes. as Marta mentioned, there were two visits that were done within the first phase one. So these are the objectives of the second visit, because of course assessment is a very important part, constant assessment. And so after the first visit, we grouped we regrouped to talk about, okay, what are the needs, what can we do to meet the different dimensions, the needs of the different dimensions in these children. So one of the goals was the cognitive and social dimension goals, to increase group coordination and collaboration. And the objectives that we had set were the participants will practice an exercise of group coordination at least once during the session, and they will describe the benefits of a collaborative activity, and will elaborate a creative exercise related to it. So we saw the need for these children to start working with their peers and in those relationships, because that's who they had. They have these peers, that's their family. Biophysical dimension was to increase anxiety management skills. And how we work that? Well, completing an activity where they would integrate the use of the body as a strategy of relaxation. So this, we just kept using this goal, and adding this tad of mindfulness to the experience, because we have seen in personal training and personal life and professionally how mindfulness works with children, adolescents, and adults as well. Psycho-emotional dimension, to develop emotional awareness. The participants will identify and demonstrate verbally or non-verbally at least one emotion that they're feeling during this session. So some of these children have a harder time, right? We talked about the psychosocial skills, and they might have a hard time verbalizing to you because they don't know you, but they would answer you with the drum. So that's part of that emotional awareness. They're non-verbally, they're expressing an emotion when they were asked to. In a cognitive and emotional dimension, we wanted them to develop executive function skills creatively during this crisis management, and they would contribute one idea on how to transform the negative experience into positive ones. So it was a song that Marta wrote about how the hurricane came and went and what it left.
El
And
huracán vino y se fue y nos trajo a Emmanuel.
yeah, so the hurricane came and went and brought me something. So they love that song because one of the things that happened is that, well, it brought me the people that are visiting, it brought me this other kid. For me, the hurricane brought me all of the children of the group, and that sensation of them is like, oh yeah, like you came into my life because of the hurricane, just made them feel so good. And then they started to see like, well, yes, it brought us movie nights. So they were having movie nights and not having to do homework, and then they had visits, and toys, that some people would bring them toys, or there were people that now they were doing reconstruction of the facilities. So they started to see like things, like the silver lining, to call it one way, of that experience. Psychological dimension of the second visit of phase one is to increase self-esteem and strengthen the relationship with peers. We talked about those relationships. So from the objectives, we had the participants will verbalize a positive comment about their peers or about themselves, and they will explore the positive concepts that define a person. And it was so interesting because as we did different activities where they had to talk about their peers or talk about themselves, it was a very emotional, particularly with adolescents. It was very emotional for them to know what their peers said that they were good at. It's like they were saying, well, I like how you do this or that, and the kids' eyes would just go like so big and in excitement. So this was a very important goal as well.
We kept going working with cognitive animation goals. It was basically to promote focused attention. We wanted them to be present, to learn to be present at the time what was going on. So we were using mindfulness skills. Also, we were doing by the biophysical dimension goal, we will continue to develop mindfulness, where they will identify a strategy to use in each session, hoping that they could use these mindfulness strategies in their daily lives. We wanted them to keep going with that. And then we use instruments, we use movement, we use singing, we use so many types of interventions to help them go through that they at the end could identify them. We also worked with identifying and expressing feelings, and this was similar to the first one. We also were working to promote the development of emotional management and self-regulation. And the other phases.
So then we have mending our souls. And we continue working on cognitive, biopsychological, psycho-emotional goals. But in this phase, the big difference was that we had a musical goal, and where we wanted the kids to develop basic musicianship. And this was because of the person that was funding this program had that in their hearts. They wanted children to, through this experience, to learn how to play instruments. So we saw it as an opportunity to do therapeutic music education. So even though we were teaching music skills, we were doing it to meet the therapeutic goals that we were already working with.
Yeah. I want to add to that we wanted them to go back to the normal life, the new normal. And learning an instrument is going through that process. And also trying to help them view themselves as musicians, as part of the community in that way, because most of these children are used to have therapy and are used to have music therapy, not music therapy, but for us, they were used to already have music therapy. And they sometimes think that there's something wrong with them. And if we wanted to help them with self-esteem, music learning, playing an instrument, being part of the community by doing that, help them with their self-esteem.
There we see some pictures of some of the interventions. That's our colleague Natalia Rodriguez with the ukulele, and the kids playing the drums and playing the piano. They are, we are a very musical culture. So having a drum, having a tubano, like you see in the first picture, it was like a big deal because it was a real instrument. It was not a toy instrument. So just having that feel of like I'm playing this real instrument was a great deal for these children. It was a whole experience.
Puerto Rico has definitely gone through hard times. The hurricane, the earthquakes, and now with the pandemic. It feels like we have gone through phase one many times, and now we are going through phase one with the pandemic with our children. I'm working with babies, infants, and the first time they saw me with a mask, they seemed to be uncomfortable, but now they look like they're trusting me with the music therapy interventions that I'm using for them.
We have a couple of things that we want to share with you. Advice for the future and advice for all of us.
I think that when there is a pandemic or an earthquake or two hurricanes, people can get kind of like it's the end of life. Like this series of mommies walking around and walking dead, and I have to survive and I have to get food, and no, I don't care what is happening to you, I just need to eat, or I need to be safe, I don't care. So we need to review our values. What do we want from this for these people? And I say no religious, because I think this has to go beyond the religion. This has to be a human core of values. We help each other. We have patience. We have a vision of that the other person can have a better quality of life. And those core values will help us survive. Yes.
Also, nobody is going to be fully ready for a catastrophe, and we never know when it may happen. And you never think that that might happen to you. But it may happen. I mean, I never dreamed that I will go through a pandemic. And the thing is that the feelings that we're experiencing is like a grief, because life will change and the world will be different after all of this subsides. And so, although we are not fully ready, we need to take into account that we can survive this together. We need to keep calm, and we need to listen and listen and listen. Can you tell us about that, Marta?
Yes. I think we need to listen and observe what's happening in our environment before we jump to help people. We really need to be for the people there, so they can tell us in the way they can what they need. And it's very important to hold ourselves and be patient for that. Also, we need to learn as much as we can about resilience. This is something that is a big topic now, but we'll never know enough. So the most we can learn, the most richer we can read, the better will be when the disaster comes. The same about trauma, and especially about coping. How do we learn to live this new normal?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that with coping skills? So this is a subject that should never be old. Never.
Mm-hmm. We need to learn to acknowledge our own needs. And I think this is one of the hardest for us that practice any kind of therapy, music therapy is included, because we want to save the world, and we forget that we have to also, put your mask first, and then you put the mask on your, you know, companions. Just like that, we need to put the mask on ourselves, and we need to acknowledge that we have needs, physical, mental, spiritual. We have needs. And there was a time, I remember a situation where I had to say to someone, I cannot do X and Y. And the person was like, but you told me that you were going to do it. And I'm like, yes, but I didn't know at that time that I would be so burned out. Okay, and this was within this whole situation of Maria and all of that, Irma and hurricane here and there. So we need to be aware, and that we were like, you're gonna run on adrenaline, and this is what's gonna happen. You're gonna run on adrenaline. It happened to us. We did so many things. We drove to so many places, and we were just go 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 go, and there's a point where the body just cannot handle it anymore, and then we'll have even though burnout, we'll have a burnout, emotional burnout, physical burnout. And a lot of people that I knew, this happened to them as well, because you are part also, you experience the catastrophe. And then you have to be also very aware of compassion fatigue. And this is something very real. And it's when you feel like you cannot help anymore. And it's not because you don't like helping or don't want to help, but it's just that you're given so much that you need to take a break. And it is okay to take a break. And as you understand, when you go through compassion fatigue, then you will see the signs in the future before you experience compassion fatigue. If you haven't heard about this term, and I encourage you to go and Google it and look it up. What is compassion fatigue and how can we avoid compassion fatigue? So these are the things that we think are very important to keep in mind. We're working in catastrophes, disasters, first aid, emergency, psychological, emotional emergency, through music therapy.
Thank you very much. We want to sing a song for you, a couple.
Yes.
La tormenta se acabó, la tormenta terminó y nos trajo la esperanza. Gracias por estar aquí.
The storm is over, it's all done, and it brought us hope. Thank you for being here. Gracias por estar aquí. We are so glad to be able to share this with all of you in hopes that will not only prepare you for the future, but also that will open more doors to help through music therapy the children in the foster care of all of our countries. So have a wonderful time. We're going to be here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.